Time in the subterranean amphitheater seemed to fracture. 30 silver broadswords hovered in the shadows, waiting for the killing strike. But in the center of the executioner's block, the apex predator was not looking at the blades. Caleb's molten, feral eyes were locked entirely on the fragile, beating pulse of Lyra's exposed throat. He was a starving beast, and she was the only oxygen left in a burning world. With a sound that was half human groan and half animal howl, Caleb surged forward. His elongated, razor-sharp canines sank deep into the juncture of her neck and shoulder. The ancient, irrevocable claiming bite had been struck.
Caleb. Oh God.
Lyra's spine arched violently as pain flared bright and sharp. But the agony lasted for only a fraction of a second. Instantly, the pain melted into a rushing, torrential wave of liquid heat. The mating bond detonated between them like a dying star going supernova. In her mind, she didn't just feel Caleb's physical presence. She felt the crushing, infinite weight of his soul crashing into hers. And Caleb felt the cure. The moment her ordinary, wolfless blood touched his tongue, the dark magic array in the room shattered. The toxic, suffocating frost on the black granite evaporated into steam. The jagged, black veins of corruption that were tearing Caleb's body apart violently halted, then began to dissolve, burning away under the absolute purity of her scent.
What is happening? The array is failing. Guards, strike him down now. Cut off his head before he shifts.
The 30 executioners lunged forward, their silver swords catching the torchlight. But Caleb finally pulled back from Lyra's throat. He did not turn into a feral, mindless beast. The golden madness in his eyes fractured and dissolved, replaced by a crystalline, terrifyingly clear winter blue. The curse was dead. Caleb stood up. He didn't just rise, he ascended. The billionaire wiped a single drop of his mate's blood from his lower lip. His body was completely whole, vibrating with an overwhelming, ancient power that had been suppressed for years. He didn't even draw a weapon. He simply turned his head toward the charging guards and released his true, unchained alpha aura.
Kneel.
The single word hit the amphitheater with the physical force of a freight train. It wasn't a request. It was a biological absolute. The 30 armed executioners didn't just stop. Their knees violently buckled. The sheer, suffocating gravity of Caleb's restored dominance crushed them to the black granite floor. Their silver swords clattered uselessly against the stone.
Impossible. You were dying. You were a decaying abomination. She has no wolf spirit. She is a defective reject.
She is your Luna, and her blood is the only reason you are still drawing breath in my presence, Blackwell.
Caleb stepped deliberately over a kneeling guard, walking toward the raised dais where the 12 elders sat paralyzed by his aura. The temperature in the room wasn't freezing anymore. It was boiling with the terrifying electrical heat of his rage. He looked up at the High Council, his blue eyes promising absolute methodical destruction.
You brought dark magic into a tribunal. You attempted to execute me. And worse, you ordered men to draw silver in the presence of my wife.
Elder Blackwell opened his mouth, but blood suddenly dripped from his nose. The sheer atmospheric pressure of Caleb's anger was physically suffocating the alphas on the dais. But before Caleb could rip the stone platform apart, a small, warm hand slid perfectly into his scarred palm.
Caleb, look at me.
The lethal, world-ending pressure vanished instantly. Caleb spun around, ignoring the council entirely. His terrifying demeanor dissolved the moment he looked at Lyra. Her neck was marked with the permanent dark scar of his bite, claiming her to his soul for eternity. The most feared man on the continent dropped to his knees on the stone floor, pulling her trembling hands to his lips.
You saved me. My life, my empire, my soul. It all belongs to you, Lyra. Tell me who you want me to destroy first.
They did not run from the tribunal, they walked. As Caleb led Lyra out of the subterranean amphitheater, not a single executioner dared to raise their head from the freezing black granite. The heavy iron gates, which had been locked to seal their tomb, were effortlessly ripped off their hinges by Caleb's bare, unscarred hand. The absolute, suffocating silence of the council's defeat followed them all the way to the surface. The world outside had not changed, but the laws of physics surrounding the billionaire had been entirely rewritten. The crippling limp was gone. The violent, ragged friction in his lungs had vanished. As they stepped into the back of the armored SUV, Lyra realized she was no longer sitting next to a dying, feral beast fighting a curse. She was sitting next to an uncaged god. For weeks, the air around Caleb had tasted of scorched ozone and bitter, decaying blood. Now, the cabin of the car was flooded with the pure, overwhelming scent of rain-soaked cedar and rolling thunderstorms. He didn't smell like a curse anymore. He smelled like absolute, insurmountable power.
You are trembling.
The voice was a deep, resonant rumble that vibrated effortlessly through the leather seats. It held no pain, no hesitation. Caleb reached across the dark cabin. For the first time since they had met, his hand did not shake with the agonizing effort of suppressing his own magic. His long, elegant fingers wrapped gently around her wrist, pulling her seamlessly across the leather seat and directly into his lap. Lyra gasped softly, her hands automatically landing on his broad chest. Beneath his ruined, blood-stained shirt, his heart was beating with a slow, terrifyingly steady rhythm. But what shocked her most was the heat. He wasn't a freezing corpse anymore. His skin radiated a scorching, living warmth that immediately began to thaw the cold deep within her own bones.
You aren't cold. You've been freezing since the day I met you, and now you're burning up.
The dark magic starved my body of heat for over a decade, Lyra. I had forgotten what it felt like to be warm. Until you.
He buried his face in the crook of her neck, right where the permanent, silver-lined scar of his claiming bite now rested against her pulse. He inhaled deeply, a low, territorial rumble vibrating in his chest. He wasn't breathing her in like a desperate addict looking for a sedative anymore. He was breathing her in like a king worshiping his crown. When they arrived back at the Sterling estate, the environment itself seemed to recognize its master's resurrection. The perpetual layer of frost that had plagued the West Wing was melting, turning to harmless water droplets on the velvet wallpaper. Caleb didn't let Lyra walk. He carried her up the grand staircase effortlessly, kicking the heavy oak doors of his private quarters shut behind them. The bedroom was cast in shadows. Caleb set her gently on the edge of the massive mattress. Lyra watched as the most feared alpha on the eastern seaboard, a man who had just brought the entire High Council to its knees with a single word, slowly dropped to his own knees on the hardwood floor directly in front of her. He didn't speak. With impossibly gentle, deliberate movements, Caleb reached out and unfastened her ruined shoes, slipping them off her tired feet. He pressed a warm, lingering kiss to her ankle, then her knee, treating the wolfless reject of the Wilder pack with the absolute, unyielding reverence of a deity.
Caleb, you don't have to kneel for me.
I will kneel for no one else in this world, Lyra. But before you, I will never stand.
He looked up at her, his flawless winter blue eyes glowing with an obsession so profound it defied logic. He shifted forward, resting his massive hands on her thighs, framing her entirely within his space.
The council will attempt to retaliate for tonight. They will try to claim that because you have no wolf spirit, you are unfit to be my Luna. They will try to tear us apart.
Let them try. I didn't face down 30 silver executioner swords just to let an old man in a velvet robe tell me where I belong.
Caleb's smile was devastating. It was a predator's smile, perfectly relaxed and absolutely lethal. He rose to his feet, pulling Lyra up with him, wrapping her entirely in his overwhelming heat and the scent of cedar and thunderstorms.
Let them come, my love. If they dare to speak a single word against you, I will burn their ancient strongholds to ash, and I will build you a new palace upon their ruins. The world is yours now. You only have to tell me how you want it shaped.
For 3 days following the collapse of the High Council's tribunal, the Sterling estate existed in a state of absolute, suspended animation. The outside world was entirely locked away. Inside the gilded cage, the physical laws of the mansion had been entirely rewritten by the breaking of the curse. The suffocating, bitter frost that had plagued the West Wing for a decade was gone, replaced by the overwhelming, intoxicating scent of rain-soaked cedar and blooming ozone. Lyra stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the master suite. Her fingers hovered over the curve of her neck. The silver-lined scar of Caleb's claiming bite rested perfectly over her pulse point. It wasn't just a physical mark. It was a biological broadcast of absolute, untouchable power. Through the mating bond, she could feel the steady, thunderous rhythm of her husband's heart beating in time with her own. The constant, agonizing static of his dying curse had been silenced, leaving behind a profound, terrifying peace. The door to the master suite opened, but there was no sound of footsteps. Caleb moved with the fluid, silent grace of a shadow. The billionaire alpha crossed the vast expanse of the bedroom, his eyes locking onto Lyra's reflection in the glass. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit, the pristine white collar open at the throat, revealing the matching claiming mark Lyra had left on his skin. He was whole. He was flawless. And he was entirely, fatally obsessed with the woman standing in front of him.
You are staring at the scar.
The voice vibrated through the floorboards, rich and impossibly deep. Caleb stepped behind her, completely enveloping her smaller frame in his overwhelming heat. He didn't just stand near her, he surrounded her. His large, calloused hands came up to rest on her waist, his thumbs tracing slow, deliberate circles against her silk dress. He lowered his head, pressing a reverent, lingering kiss directly over the silver scar on her neck.
I am trying to convince myself that I am not dreaming. For 20 years, I was told that because I possessed no wolf spirit, I was entirely defective, a broken thing. And now?
Caleb's hands tightened on her waist. The ambient temperature in the room spiked instantly, a physical manifestation of his possessive rage at the memory of anyone ever making her feel inadequate. He turned her around, forcing her to look directly into his flawless, winter blue eyes. There was no feral madness in them anymore, only the terrifying, absolute certainty of a god looking at his only religion.
You are the cure to a darkness that baffled the greatest minds of our kind, Lyra. Your blood shattered a curse that held an entire empire hostage. If anyone in this world is broken, it is them, never you.
Before Lyra could answer, a subtle vibration hummed through the floor. Caleb's gaze snapped toward the heavy oak doors a fraction of a second before a frantic knock shattered the quiet intimacy of the room. It was Paige, Caleb's most trusted intelligence officer. Through the bond, Lyra felt a flicker of dark amusement ripple through her husband's mind.
Enter.
The doors opened. The intelligence officer didn't dare step fully into the room, keeping her eyes respectfully lowered, suffocated by the sheer atmospheric pressure of Caleb's restored alpha aura. She delivered the news in a trembling breath. Elder Blackwell and Victor had summoned every elite family on the eastern seaboard to the Central Territory Hall. They were officially declaring Caleb Sterling dead. They claimed the Alpha had succumbed to a feral mutation and burned to ashes in the tribunal fires. Victor was stepping forward to claim the Sterling Empire, the territory, and the vacant seat on the High Council. They were preparing to divide the spoils of Caleb's life.
They are throwing a coronation for a corpse that hasn't even grown cold.
Caleb threw his head back and released a low, vibrating laugh that contained absolutely no humor. It was the sound of a predator watching its prey willingly walk into a slaughterhouse. He looked down at Lyra, his eyes gleaming with a lethal, terrifying promise. He didn't ask for his weapons. He didn't summon his bodyguards. He simply extended his hand toward his mate.
They believe the throne is empty, my love. I believe it is time we attend Victor's little celebration and show them exactly who they have awakened.
Lyra didn't hesitate. She placed her hand in his. The wolfless reject of the Wilder pack and the resurrected king of the eastern seaboard walked out of the bedroom together. They were not going to negotiate. They were not going to explain. They were going to walk into the heart of the territory and burn the old world entirely to the ground. The Central Territory Hall was packed to the rafters with the Eastern elites. They had gathered to divide the spoils of a dead king. Victor stood on the raised marble dais, wearing a tailored suit that cost more than most packs earned in a decade. He raised a crystal glass of champagne to the crowd, a sickening, triumphant smile plastered across his face. He was preparing to deliver the eulogy for Caleb Sterling and step into the vacant throne of the High Council.
It is a tragedy that Alpha Sterling succumbed to his feral mutations. But the Eastern Territory cannot remain leaderless. As his closest rival, I am prepared to take on the heavy burden of his empire and guide our people into a new era of...
The speech died in his throat. Victor didn't stop speaking by choice. He stopped because the heavy oak doors at the back of the Great Hall were pushed open, and the physical atmosphere inside the room instantly collapsed. The air didn't just grow cold, it turned to lead. The ambient chatter of 300 elites was extinguished in a fraction of a second, swallowed by a terrifying, absolute silence. There was no scent of decaying blood. There was no metallic tang of a feral curse burning out of control. The Grand Hall was suddenly, violently flooded with the overwhelming, intoxicating scent of rain-soaked cedar and pure, unchained alpha dominance. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, scrambling over each other in blind, biological panic to clear a path down the center aisle. Walking down the aisle was the dead king. Caleb Sterling wore a perfectly tailored black suit, his spine straight, moving with the fluid, effortless grace of an apex predator, completely at the height of his power. There was no limp. There were no black veins pulsing on his neck. And walking beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm, was Lyra Wilder.
You're dead. The tribunal fires. The curse. You were burning alive.
Victor stumbled backward, his champagne flute slipping from his trembling fingers and shattering against the marble floor. It was a pathetic echo of the night he had humiliated Lyra months ago. He pointed a shaking finger at the approaching billionaire, his voice cracking with sheer terror.
Gods, draw your silver! Strike him down! He's an abomination! He's a feral beast!
50 armed territory guards stepped forward from the shadows of the pillars, their hands reaching for their weapons. But Caleb didn't even look at them. He didn't break his stride. He simply released the full, crushing weight of his restored alpha aura. It was a physical shockwave of absolute, unquestionable power. The 50 heavily armed guards didn't draw their weapons. They dropped to their knees simultaneously, their foreheads pressing against the marble floor in complete submission.
You are standing too close to my throne, Victor. And you are breathing my wife's air.
Caleb stopped at the base of the dais. He looked up at Victor with eyes of flawless winter blue. There was no madness in them, only the cold, terrifying certainty of a god looking at an insect. Victor's knees completely gave out. He collapsed onto the steps of the dais, weeping openly, his ambition and arrogance shattered into dust.
Put him in irons. Strip his pack of all lands, all titles and all wealth. Let him spend the rest of his miserable life working in the deepest perimeter mines.
Time did not heal Victor Holloway's humiliation. It only solidified it into permanent history. 6 months later, the High Council convened for the official coronation. The world had fundamentally changed. The gilded halls of the Capitol were adorned in silver and midnight blue, and kneeling in the dirt courtyard outside, chained in heavy iron shackles, Victor and his new bride were forced to watch the broadcast of the ceremony through the tall glass windows. Inside the grand chamber, Lyra stood at the pinnacle of the highest dais. She wore a gown woven from gold thread and scattered with diamonds, her posture radiant and untouchable. She was no longer the wolfless reject of a minor family. She was the absolute ruler of the eastern seaboard. The elite families who had once laughed at her now bowed their heads so low they nearly touched the floor, desperate for a single glance of her favor. But Lyra wasn't looking at the crowd. She was looking at the most feared, powerful man on the continent. Caleb stepped up to the dais. He didn't care about the hundreds of cameras or the watching nobility. In front of the entire world, the billionaire king slowly dropped to one knee before her. He took her small hand in his winter blue eyes glowing with an obsession that would burn for eternity. He pressed a reverent, lingering kiss to her fingertips. The man who owned half the world looked up at the woman who had saved his soul, completely surrendering his crown to her.
You once said you had nothing, Lyra. But now, you have me, and you have the entire world beneath my feet.
I only ever wanted you, Caleb. But I suppose the world is a nice bonus.